Most people think the Roman Republic collapsed because of ambition and betrayal. They imagine generals fighting for power and politicians plotting in dark rooms, but money was the real weapon. Today we are going to uncover how one man turned debt into political power. And by the end of this video, you will see how the financial tricks used by Julius Caesar still shape modern politics. Julius Caesar was not just a general or a dictator, he was also one of the most dangerous financial strategists in ancient history. To understand this, we need to travel back to the late Roman Republic around 60 BC. Rome at that time was the richest state in the Mediterranean, but under the surface, the economy was deeply unstable. The Roman system was built on credit. Senators borrowed money to fund elections, landowners borrowed money to buy estates, even entire provinces were financed by debt, and the lenders were not small bankers. They were the Roman elite themselves. Wealthy families loaned money to politicians and expected favors in return. So politics and debt became tied together. If a politician owed you money, you owned his decisions. And this is where Caesar enters the story. But here, things get complicated. Caesar himself was drowning in debt. Historians estimate that by the time he was a young politician, he owed around 25 million denarii. That was an insane amount of money. To understand how big this was, imagine a modern politician owing hundreds of millions before even winning office. Most people in Rome believed Caesar's career was already finished. No one trusted a man that deep in debt. But Caesar understood something that many others missed. In Rome, debt was not just a burden. Debt could also be a weapon. If you owed powerful people money, you could also negotiate power with them, and Caesar knew exactly who to approach. In 60 BC, he formed a secret alliance with two of the richest and most powerful men in Rome, Marcus Licinius Crassus and Pompey the Great. Crassus was not just wealthy. He was probably the richest man in Roman history. He made fortunes through real estate and loans. Pompey was Rome's greatest military hero at that time. Caesar connected these two men through a deal historians call the First Triumvirate. But this was not simply a political alliance. It was a financial arrangement. Crassus supported Caesar's debts. Pompey supported Caesar's political rise. In return, Caesar pushed laws that benefited them both. And suddenly, Caesar's massive debt stopped looking like a weakness. It became leverage. And this is the part no book ever mentions. Debt forced Caesar to stay aggressive. A politician without debt can retire quietly. A politician drowning in debt must keep winning. Caesar needed money constantly, and the Roman system gave him one powerful option. War. In 58 BC, Caesar became governor of Gaul. Today that area includes France and parts of Western Europe. Officially, he went there to defend Rome's borders, but Gaul was also a massive economic opportunity. War in the ancient world created wealth through land, seizures, slaves, and tribute. Over the next 8 years, Caesar conquered enormous territories. Millions of people were captured or enslaved. Gold, silver, and taxes began flowing back to Rome. Caesar paid off many of his debts, but more importantly, he built something even more valuable: loyalty. His soldiers became personally loyal to him instead of the Roman Senate. That was extremely dangerous for the Republic. Rome was supposed to be ruled by institutions, not individuals. But here, things get complicated again. While Caesar was winning wars abroad, Rome's economy at home was breaking down. The late Republic suffered from a serious debt crisis. Land prices had risen rapidly. Rich elites owned huge estates called latifundia. Small farmers could not compete. Many borrowed money to survive. When they failed to pay their debts, they lost their land. Thousands of Roman citizens became poor urban workers. And if this sounds familiar, it should, because the same pattern repeats in modern economies. Asset prices rise, debt grows. Eventually, people cannot pay. In Rome, this created massive political anger. Ordinary citizens wanted debt relief. The Senate mostly protected creditors. And Caesar saw an opportunity. When he returned to Rome in 49 BC, tensions exploded. The Senate feared his growing power and ordered him to give up his army. Instead, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with his legions. That act started a civil war. Now, most history books describe this as a military rebellion. But behind the scenes, there was also a financial agenda. Caesar understood that debt relief could win him massive public support. After gaining control of Rome, he passed several reforms. One of them targeted the debt crisis. Interest payments that had already been made were deducted from the principal. Property values were reassessed before calculating remaining. That stopped this reduced the total amount many citizens owed. Creditors were furious, but many ordinary Romans supported him, and no one ever expected this. Caesar did not cancel all debts. That would have destroyed the elite banking system. That instead, he carefully reduced the burden just enough to stabilize society while keeping lenders alive. It was a political balancing act. Too much relief would anger the rich. Too little would anger the masses. Caesar managed to walk that line better than any Roman leader before him. And this is where the modern lesson begins to appear. Because modern governments use similar strategies. When economies crash, leaders rarely erase debt completely. Instead, they restructure it, they stretch payments, they inject money into the system. They rescue banks while promising relief to citizens. The goal is always the same: prevent collapse without destroying the financial elite. Caesar understood this logic more than 2,000 years ago. But here things get darker. Caesar's financial power also made him extremely dangerous to the Roman elite. By 4 BC, he had become dictator of Rome. He controlled the army. He controlled major economic reforms. And he was wildly popular with the public. For many senators, this looked like the end of the Republic. A system once controlled by aristocratic families was now dominated by a single man who used debt politics to build mass support. That terrified them, and this fear would soon lead to one of the most famous assassinations in history. But the conspirators misunderstood something fundamental about the system they were trying to save. They believed killing Caesar would restore the old republic. They believed once the man disappeared, the financial tensions inside Rome would calm down. But history rarely works that way. When a system breaks, the problems do not disappear with one person. And this is where the story becomes even more revealing. On March 15th in 44 BC, a group of senators led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius attacked Caesar inside the Senate chamber. This day is remembered as the Ides of March. They stabbed him more than 20 times. Their goal was simple: remove the man they believed was becoming a king, restore the political balance, save the republic from dictatorship. But the reaction from Rome was not what they expected. Caesar was not just a powerful politician. He had become a symbol for the people who were struggling under the old economic system. The Senate represented wealthy creditors. Caesar represented reform. So when news of the assassination spread, the city exploded with anger. Ordinary Romans did not celebrate the return of the Republic. They mourned the death of the man who had tried to reduce their financial burden. And this is the part most people never notice. Caesar's funeral turned into a political earthquake. His ally, Mark Antony, delivered a speech that inflamed the crowd. Caesar's body was burned in the streets. Riots erupted across Rome. The conspirators who believed they had saved the Republic suddenly became fugitives. But the deeper problem still remained. Rome's financial system had not changed. Wealth was still concentrated among elite families. Land ownership was still unequal. Debt still chained thousands of citizens to creditors. Caesar had only started to address the crisis. His death left the system unstable again. And when systems become unstable, power shifts to whoever can control money and armies at the same time. This is where another young man enters the stage. A quiet 18-year-old named Octavian. Few people took him seriously at first, but Caesar had made a surprising decision before his death. In his will, he adopted Octavian as his son and heir. That meant Octavian inherited not just Caesar's name, but also his political network and financial backing. And no one ever expected this. Octavian understood the same lessons Caesar had mastered. In Rome, popularity alone was not enough. Military power alone was not enough. The real key was controlling financial loyalty. Octavian began distributing money from Caesar's estate directly to Roman citizens. Each citizen received the payment promised in Caesar's will. Imagine the impact of that moment. Thousands of ordinary Romans suddenly receiving cash from the heir of the murdered leader. This was not charity. It was political strategy. The message was clear. Caesar's legacy lived through Octavian, and the people who killed him stood against the interests of the public. At the same time, Octavian formed another alliance with Mark Antony and Lepidus. Historians call this the second. Just like Caesar's earlier alliance, this was not purely political. It was also financial. They seized property from wealthy elites who supported the assassins. Large fortunes were confiscated, the money funded armies and bought loyalty. Thousands of political enemies were executed during these proscriptions. Rome's financial elite suddenly realized something terrifying. Debt politics had evolved into wealth seizure politics. The rules of the Republic were collapsing. But here things get complicated again. Eventually, the alliance between Octavian and Mark Antony began to break. Power sharing rarely lasts long when enormous wealth and military control are involved. Antony moved east and allied himself with Cleopatra in Egypt. Octavian stayed in Rome, building his support among the Senate and the people. And just like Caesar before him, he understood the power of financial narratives. Octavian framed Antony as a threat who planned to move Rome's wealth to Egypt. He presented himself as the protector of Roman stability. The final conflict came in 31 BC at the Battle of Actium. Octavian defeated Antony and Cleopatra. With that victory, the last resistance to his rule collapsed. A few years later, Octavian took a new title, Augustus Homius, First Emperor, and the Roman Republic officially ended. But look carefully at the chain of events that led here. The Republic did not fall only because of ambition or military conquest. It collapsed under the weight of financial inequality, debt, crises, and political manipulation of economic reforms. Julius Caesar was simply the man who learned how to weaponize those pressures better than anyone else. He turned personal debt into political alliances. He turned military conquest into financial recovery. And he turned debt relief into mass public support. Modern politics still follows the same pattern. Governments rarely talk openly about debt power. But behind every election campaign, every bailout, every financial rescue, there is a negotiation between creditors, politicians, and the public. When banks collapse, governments restructure debt instead of erasing it. When citizens struggle, politicians promise relief while protecting financial institutions. The system survives by adjusting pressure rather than removing it. Caesar understood this balancing act 2,000 years ago. His story reveals something uncomfortable about political power. The leaders who control debt narratives often control the future of the state. Because debt is not just an economic number. It is a relationship of power. If you owe money, you depend on someone. If millions of citizens owe money, governments must manage that dependency carefully. Too much pressure creates rebellion. Too much relief destroys the financial structure. So the system always walks a narrow path. And that is the deeper lesson hidden inside the rise and fall of Julius Caesar. He did not invent debt itself, but he showed the world how debt could be used as a political engine. An engine that could lift one man to absolute power and destroy a republic that had lasted centuries. If you learned something valuable, then hit subscribe.